At what point in your, because I'm thinking, at what point in your life do you realize you should stop chasing different people and like settle down?
So you were saying that you feel lucky you met your girl, and I was like, man, I don't know if you're lucky, and I didn't mean that like anything disrespectful. I just meant that there's an element of luck, like, yeah, you got to meet the right person and hope that person, vibes with you. And I think that's probably a relatively rare thing to accomplish, considering how different people can be. But there's a lot of preparation that goes into it. You got to know what to do. A motherfucking hunter you don't call a hunter lucky because a deer stumbled across his path and he had spent all of his time prior to hunting other deer, so he knew how to shoot and trap it and all that.
I think Drake said it the best. Practice. All those other girls were practice.
Right.
They were just practice for you. I love that. That was a smooth line.
Well, and look, you can't say that to your girl, or maybe you can. Look, I certainly don't say that to like my girl. Like, yeah, man, you gotta understand, all them other girls before you, that was training, and we all gonna be good now because they're in the past. You don't need to bring it up. But
here's another thing. I don't understand, because I'm personally I'm a very sex positive person. Like, right. I don't want to shame anybody for anything. I understand that your partner is going to have a past. Like, if your partner doesn't have a past, you're going to be your partner's past.
Which is, do you really think that though?
Yeah.
Like, because if I'm interpreting what you're saying correctly, the idea is that the less experience you have, the more likely it is that this relationship is going to fail.
Not necessarily. Not just partners or anything. Right. But if someone's completely sheltered.
Okay, right.
And they haven't dated anyone.
There's a difference between being completely sheltered and having triple digits.
Yeah.
Like there's a middle ground.
Yeah, there's a middle ground. There's a middle ground.
And my thought process on it is, I'm not the guy that's going to say that casual encounters don't affect men the way they affect women. I think that after a certain point, everybody is negatively affected by too much, and you got to undo that damage and figure out why you were doing it, and then figure out what you're trying to get moving out of it. Because if you don't really have, there's a lot of work that.
So, and that's why I say I'm lucky I found my girl, and I would say especially when I did, because you have to find out why. Like if you have a past, you want to look into it, you have to find out why you've done that and do some reflection. And not until I got my girl now that was I in a place that I would be able to do that reflection. And the fact that she's a counselor, perfect.
Let me tell you something, just to like highlight that idea. When I first met my girl 10 years ago at this point, I actually thought she didn't like me. Right. And it wasn't because she wasn't showing signs. It's just that you get so used to dealing with one, we'll call it a hyper aggressive type of behavior when the intended outcome is just a quick one-off and bounce, or a few quick one-offs and bounce, that you don't know how to interpret someone who is showing normal signs of being into you. And I erroneously believed that she just wasn't that into me, and the reality was she was, obviously, and she's still here.
Where's she from?
Well, she was born and raised in Portugal, but
So and that's important too, because different cultures have different ways of dating or courting. I think it was. And I don't want to misspeak, but there's like Dominican Republic or something. I was in like a nightclub or bar, and the guys they're very aggressive.
Yeah.
And then I remember coming to America, and I was at a party with a Dominican dude, and I saw his actions of like, if you want to talk to a girl, he just grabs her by the arm. And there's some girls that if you don't, but there's some girls that if you don't grab them by the, like, so it's different people.
Different strokes for different strokes, different cultures. got different kind of vultures, that kind of thing. I'm just rhyming stuff. But the whole point though is it's not just cultural, because it's not like she was like, an adult over there and came over, but at least culture in a sense of your geographic location and the kind of history that goes into that. But it's also the type of experiences that you have in your formative years and what you get brought up with, your family life. She comes from a very solid family and is just a solid together person. And so a lot of the behavior that you get used to seeing, because look, man, I think that I'm not judging anybody. I'm just calling it what it is. After a certain point, after a certain age, or even with a certain likelihood, if you're spending all your time in like the clubs or at parties, drinking and stuff like that, well, you're probably in pursuit of something a little different. You might not know that, and you might not like what you're in pursuit of because you haven't reconciled what your actions are delivering versus what you actually want. But that's kind of what you're going to get. And that was my issue. I had been hunting through the garbage, and I had stumbled into a real restaurant with real food and real plates.
Yeah, you know how to take it.
And I was like, what is wrong with this food? Yeah, you know what? Here's a perfect example. Probably not you, because you live out here in the Midwest, but you ever go to the country from living and being in the city too long, and you're like, yo, this air smells funny. And it's not that it smells funny, it's just not smog polluted. Yeah. And you're like, yo, it's not disgusting, it's just different. And you got to be like, oh, this is what fresh air smells like. Because you didn't get used to the dirty air.
Yeah.
And now when you go back to, when I go to dirty air, I'm like, holy hell, how did I ever breathe this stuff kind of deal. But that's where, and I think that's what we eventually understood one another.
You went to a restaurant and you got to the bathroom, and there was a dude in there, and it made you uncomfortable because he's there to give you mints and like give you towels to dry your hands, and it's something you're not used to.
Right.
And that's Anna.
It's some high level, it's some high level stuff.
You know how to
and I'm like, yo, what is this good? In fact, it's funny. I remember the first time I had that experience. I was like, what am I supposed to do with this guy? He's got a jar full of money right there.
I say that because I was so uncomfortable. I'm like, and I've never been the dude.
Like, would you like your hands washed? And I'm like, I guess so. That's part of where we are. But we're at now. That's the level we're playing on.
Yeah, I don't like that dude in the bath, because if I don't have cash.
Well, right, because I'm not going into the bathroom. You know what it's like? Like when I get into, like if somebody picks my bags up at like a resort or hotel, I'm expected to tip. At the very least, that's the idea. When you go out to eat here in America, that's the idea. You're gonna leave a tip. Now you can leave it in your car or whatever, but you're expected to leave a tip. When I go to the bathroom, I'm not thinking, after I shake and zip my pants up, somebody's going to come along and offer me a service and I got to drop the bread. Now, maybe that's me being low class. Maybe that's something that happens. But I've eaten at some pretty nice places now and been in some pretty nice places. And I don't know if that was just a scheme to take advantage of broke people who don't know better, but I have not seen that guy at most of the places I've been.
It's funny? He doesn't work there.
Oh, of course he doesn't work there.
He's just a dude who's like, I could probably make some money to get gas for the week. So he just put a tissue box in the bathroom and stood next to it.
I don't know what they called him where you're from. Are you from New York? I'm sure there's a different.
Did the manager know he was in the bathroom?
Oh, the manager knew, right? Well, because you let a guy come because he adds a little clout and flavor to your establishment.
On a serious note, that is a great hustle. If you've got a great suit. Like if you're a kid, you just went to prom. You
got a suit hanging around.
You went to prom, you got that suit, you ain't doing nothing with it. Go to nice restaurants with a tissue box
and some mints, maybe a condom.
So the way my brain always works is I'm like, how can I turn this into a business venture?
Okay.
That's kind of how, and my girl, take this back to relationships. Like, I didn't realize how much I try to turn everything into. I don't have hobbies. You can make money off of everything, or you can make money off of anything, and you find something you like doing. So if you like, my girl likes doing macrame.
Now you gotta explain what macrame is. 'Cause
Or-
I didn't know what macrame was until you told me what macrame was.
I didn't even know what macrame was. Like
Now you
but
do know.
it's-
You got macrame hanging over the door.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. It's I guess this rope art, but I'm like, Etsy pays, monetize that.
Right.
Well, I think that one was her idea, but we're together so much, I start to think like
You
her,
can't
and
tell,
she
but-
starts to think like me, and so we work perfect together because I'm a go 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 go. No matter what, I'm moving forward. I don't need a plan. That's the type of dude I am.
Your ready, fire, aim approach. You know.
She is more of a planner, and being able to be with her, especially right before the pandemic happened, like I got to be with someone 24/7 that actually slows down and thinks before they make decisions. And being by myself on the road for like 10 years, I don't bounce anything off of anyone. I have an idea, I just go. And I've never been around. For years, like I've lived with you for a year. Right?
Yeah.
Like I live with random people all over like America, but I've never been able to spend time with someone. This is the first girl I've ever lived with.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, here's the. I mean, because I'm not. I wonder how much like you I am in this regard, but I have had the exact same issue. It's like it's a joke around the house now that like I come up with an idea and I execute it, and we talked about it because it makes her nervous when I just have these random ideas. And she realized why I made her nervous one day, and she was like, I realized that when you say these things, you're thinking them out loud. It's not a reality. The thing is, when it becomes a reality, then it's like, okay, now we have to like cope and deal with this and figure it out. But
can you give an example of that?
okay, so I was talking about like where I would move and relocate in the United States. And it just comes to mind. I just, pop up cities and ideas because I'm thinking through it as I say it. That's like how I process information. And it's making her nervous as hell because she's worried about us having to pack up and move suddenly, right? But it was just an idea, just me working through it. Compare that to when we moved to Portugal, right? I said it and she thought it was just an idea until I was like, all right, let's start looking up spots to be and really start making moves and making this a real deal. But that's cool because that's a complimentary personality.
What did she give you?
What do you mean? What did she give me?
So like in our situation, I'm like, so I'm a go. Sage is like let's think about it.
Like
So
what did we get?
I was able to get from her like the ability to slow down. She's got the ability for me to speed up and think less.
Planning.
And we balance each other out perfectly.
That's the thing we get is planning, because if it was just me, I would be.
So
in
she
fact,
brings planning to the table.
here's a perfect example, man. Where we ended up staying in Pared right outside of Lisbon.
Where's that?
Lisbon's is the capital of Portugal, right?
For listeners.
So we ended up we lived in
me. I didn't know that either, but also for listeners.
well, Lisbon is the capital of Portugal. And so when we were living in Portugal, our first apartment was right outside of Lisbon, like a suburb, probably 25-minute train ride from the city center at Caixa Sodré. Anybody who's from Lisbon knows exactly what Caixa Sodré is. You catch the line out, goes to Pared, and we get off there. The first place I found didn't even have a stove. It just was the first place I found. It looked kind of cool on the Airbnb site, and I just hopped on and put it in the list. And she's looking at like, did you realize that this didn't even have a stove? I was like, no. So she goes and she once she is like, okay, I guess this is happening.
So she's a planner.
She starts planning, looking, and we end up finding a really just an amazing apartment. It had a view of the ocean. It was right on the beach, like a 3 to 4 minute walk to the beach from the apartment. And then the city center was on the other side.
So she brings planning to the table.
Yeah, because if it was up to me, I would just go. And
then you deal with it. And then you're like, oh, and in my mind, I'm a caveman like you. I don't think like I'll get a hotel or Airbnb, and I'm like, oh, there's no stove. Now I just get to eat out and try different restaurants.
Exactly. And
it doesn't
that
stop
is
anything.
And that is very different than how she is. So it's a good It's a good match. And you got to be careful though, because I'm not the advocate of the idea that opposites attract or anything like that nonsense. I don't believe that. What I think happens is that you have the opportunity when someone when someone is strong where you're weak, you have the opportunity to create a relationship where 1 + 1 is equal to 5, right? But it takes recognition and respect to the other person's weaknesses, like during the pandemic. We have two very different philosophies about money. She actually had like over a year of living expenses saved already. Save, like she understands saving and conservative, and is very conservative with money. Spending money kind of makes her nervous, and it makes and it's cool. And it's really interesting because it's not like she grew up even close to as poor as I grew up. You'd think I'd have that attitude. Yeah. My attitude towards money is I'm just going to make some more of it. Whenever the issue comes up, I'm going to make more and we're going to be okay. So instead of scolding each other's perspective, we tried to figure out how to make it work. And it ended up working out really great because she had all this money saved because she works in the travel industry and no one was traveling during the pandemic. She had all this money saved to, live. But I was like, I'm going to charge for it to make all this money. So our lifestyle took no hit whatsoever and continues to elevate in advance. And on top of that, now I've learned the value of saving as well. You know, she's still going to continue chugging along and becoming better and better and better.
She brought planning to the table and she brought saving to the table in a different way of spending money.
Yeah.
And I think, and this is why it's important to be exposed to different people in different backgrounds and different cultures, because everyone lives in a different way. And I'm sure there's stuff you've picked up from that people in Portugal do that you didn't do that you now add to your routine.
Yeah.
And there's things that the way your mom raised you to do certain things, and maybe you was so street smart. Normal people think it's street smart, but to you it's basic.
Yeah.
There's things that you bring to the table that are irreplaceable in your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's things that you're lacking that you don't even know you're lacking.
Right.
So when you do find a person who fills those holes, then it feels like that's why you get like 1 + 1 = 5.
Right. But some people when they come together and they're not at a position maturity wise to recognize and respect someone's differences and recognize that that's where they're weak, and to do it in a manner that is not codependent, where you're not leaning on the other person, then that ends up being a problem. Their differences now become liabilities instead of assets to you. You don't see how to fit the missing puzzle piece. You see it as something that gets in the way of your puzzle. You don't
So give an example of that.
Okay, so we'll just like use the money kind of idea and example. And if my mentality is let's make money and hers is let's save money, then it's very easy for money arguments to happen about spending. So instead of letting that happen, and why do those arguments happen? Because we have two very different philosophies about survival. I'm likely going to look at the conservative method of saving, not even in a I can't enjoy life, because that I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't party. I mean, there's nothing I'm spending money on. I don't even have a flashy. Well, my Cadillac is old, but not even have a flashy car. But I might see that as some type of hindrance on my freedom. Likewise, she's going to look at my spending as this kind of reckless way to live, and there's no consideration of the future. I'm just thinking about like the most negative way you could see this, right?
Or polar opposite ways, not even negative, because yours is a positive to you.
It's a positive to me, but to her negative, and the same thing would be vice versa. And instead of letting those two things work together, we turn it into a source of conflict, a source of fighting. Now, part of this is getting in front of the problem. I know that if I'm going to be this way and I don't want to have this problem come up, that I will never have a joint bank account. Why would I do that? It's going to make everybody mad. You know, I'm going to feel like like not an adult if somebody tries to tell me how I can spend the money that I've earned. Likewise, she's going to feel nervous because she's going to look at the joint bank account and go, well, the funds are dwindling. And so it's a lot better. Look, I know there's somebody listening who thinks, oh, you know, that's like a sign of a great relationship, having a joint bank account. Look, if money is one of those things where you guys are very different, just keep your money separate, because because no good can come of it, in my opinion, if both of you are capable of earning money and you have different styles. Now, I'm not saying don't have some type of joint account if you're like saving for a house or whatever, but like your main income sources, they can't be joined. Them days is over, man.
Well, and you're speaking about relationships because that's so vague. It's like, what is dating? Like, there's what is dating versus what is relationships. And when we speak about relationships, that is so vague. But because I don't think I say I haven't had a real relationship because I haven't lived with someone. And until I lived with someone, I was like, oh, those other relationships weren't as significant as I thought they were. So like when you get to that level with someone, then you have to make some like reassessing.
Well, not only that, because like, here's the thing, man. Like, I don't care how alike you and your girl or how well you get along. There's going to be an area that you just don't get along or don't see eye to eye with, right? Because if for any other reason, then you got a brain that's a male brain, she got a brain that's a female brain, and you have had a different interpretation of the world your entire life because of that, and there will be clashes when you meet up. That is always going to happen. But until you get to the point where you have said, all right, this is the person I'm gonna stick this thing out with, you don't have to deal with those conflicts if you don't want to. You don't have to develop some type of system to work through and interact with the other person on a level beyond a casual fling. Even if it seems like it's deep, if you haven't like gone, we're in this and we're gonna make it through.
That brings up a good point. At what point in because I'm thinking, at what point in your life do you realize you should stop chasing different people and like settle down?
It depends on each person, man, and what they want.
No, I mean, and everyone's space is different, but I see a lot of people try to do. In my 20s, I didn't do real serious relationships because I knew I'm not in the part of my life for that. I'm traveling country to country, state to state. I'm on the road 300 days a year. There's no time for like a real relationship. So I never made that a thing. But I see people in my 20s that like, we're doing the same thing, literally doing the same thing. And they're in like relationships, a new one every year, and just heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak. I'm like, how many different toothbrush are you allowing in your home?
well, you know, man, like I think that everybody's going to be at a different point and want different things. Like, dude, if I could go back, not if I could go back, because I'm very happy with how everything's turned out. But if I was gonna have kids, like really trying to have a family and be a family guy, you gotta, you know, I'm 37 now. I would have started that at least 10 years ago. So that, and that means by necessity, that means I have a shorter window to work with, which means I'm probably going to enter the situation a little more, or with a little less certainty, I guess. A little less certainty, a little less sureness about how we're going to interact. But now the commitment, why this is happening, is because I'm after a family. If I'm like never interested in having kids, right, that probably gives me a longer window to work with. If I realize, and this is something I had to realize about myself personally, everybody's different. I realized, you know, what I really wanted was I wanted a solid female companion around me. That's just my thing. I'm not saying that's every guy. That's my thing. And then once I realized that, then that changed my entire approach to how I was dealing with girls. But it takes a lot of introspection and a lot of self-work, male or female, first of all, to be honest about exactly what you want and shake off the culture too, because the culture is effing toxic. It's toxic in the sense that it's telling you what you should want to do. Like, I wonder how many girls actually just want to have just want to have some kids. Want to have kids, raise a family. I suspect it's probably larger than the numbers represented, because the culture's telling them they need to go and chase, graduate from school, get your master's, have a career.
I see a lot of people follow the path of what their parents did because they don't know that anything else exists.
Right.
And I see it, and sometimes it bothers. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that one.
Yeah, well, I just use that as an example. But my point is that there are two forces. I mean, there's probably more, but two major ones competing for the mindset of the actions that you take. There is what is the popular narrative, what's going to look cool, or what's going to be most socially accepted when you talk about it. And then there's what you deep down really want to do. Everybody struggles with this, okay? The problem, or rather the solution, is really, since you live your life, to get in touch with this guy, the guy that's like, this is what I really want to do, whether that be have a bunch of girls, whether it be get married early, whether it be have kids, whatever you want to do, and then make sure that gets way more energy, to the point where you don't pay attention to the societal narrative of how your relationship or how your love life should look. Or even if you have a consistent one, a temporary one. I think a lot of people are just in the game to follow and look like they're playing the game. You know what I mean? They don't really want to go off on their path. They want to make sure they don't get ostracized. They want to fit in. They think because everyone else is doing this and they're told to do it, that it must be right.
Yeah, I don't. I've never. That's never really bothered me. I don't know if you've seen the way I move.
Well, yeah. Well, we're a different breed. I think
that's a key to my happiness. And I've learned now in my in my 20s, I started to figure out to have more empathy. But I've never actually cared what anyone thought. Anything I do good, I don't do it to look good. I do it because I felt like doing it.
Yeah.
Anything I've done that someone doesn't like, I've done it because I felt like doing it. Like, I've never had to fit in any relationship norm.
And you have to remember, that's not most people. And this is one of the cool things that occurs when you live this life. My analogy of the Matrix, man, when you come in and you got all these superpowers because you're not plugged in. You exist outside, and then when you come down, people are like, oh man, who's this cool dude who can do all these things? He can dodge bullets and dodge long-term relationships as long as he wants until he gets in one. That's not the reality of most people. Like when I was giving you that stat about how most guys, well, not most, 27% to be exact, guys under 30 haven't, I think it actually wasn't their virgins. I think it was haven't had sex in the past year. Point is, that sounds weird if you aren't, I mean, okay, so it sounds weird in general, but it sounds unbelievable if you have the ability to go get laid. You're like, how did that even happen? Right? But that's because you live in you live in a different world where you have made rules, and then with those rules, you've made rules to go, all right, that's what I want. That's what I'm going to get. Here's what I got to do to get it. And you kind of laid that out. What I'm saying is most people, they haven't even really thought about what they want, and they're just kind of along for the ride. And if they don't get lucky in terms of like being tall or being good looking or being talented at something, they're going to just kind of take what's thrown at them and kind of accept that as the normal.
Yeah. So you said that I kind of have the idea of I know what I want and I see what I have to do to get there.
Yeah.
Being with my girl, she pointed that I didn't know that that's not how everyone thought. And I think to a fault, I think mathematically. I'm like, 1 + 2 = 3. So if I want to get to 3 and I have 1, I need to do 2.
Yeah.
And no matter what it takes to do 2, I'm going to get it done. But I don't think people can see steps. A lot of people can't see steps ahead. And if you're able to start planning and seeing steps ahead and actually committing, because the problem is I think people see if they want 3 and they have 1, they know that they need 2. But they're going to try to do anything other than to dedicate their entire life to getting 2.
Right. And then they go, man, that motherfucker that got 3.
He's lucky.
He's lucky. Right. Instead of going, well, he probably put a lot of energy into getting 2. Right. And we were talking about that in another conversation about how people don't think about what it takes to achieve, quote unquote, the American dream. And I just thought this is a really interesting corollary to that, our addition, that if you know that look at the people who make 100,000 a year, and you're like, all right, how can I get to that point? You find different ways and different people who are doing it. All right, so you have a blueprint. What are you gonna do to get it? Are you actually gonna do the work? Are you gonna be patient? It's another thing that kills a lot of people is impatience. They want it quick, so they don't get it at all. And some things, by the nature of what they are, you got to take the time. You can't get it quick.
Yeah, that's another thing that I learned about being in a relationship is like how to communicate those things. Because like I'm learning that not every time someone tells you a problem, they want a solution.
Yeah, that's weird. Isn't that a weird thing?
I got solutions.
You got to understand, man. That's how God's work, man.
You tell me your problem before you finish. I'm like, all right, how are we going to start to fix this? And I didn't realize that some people just need to vent. And I didn't realize even so, I was venting my problems to my girl. She didn't give me solutions. I'm just like bouncing ideas off of her and then like writing things in my phone. And that's what I'm doing to her. And that's what she wants back from me. But my brain never worked like that.
Yeah. Well, that's why, like, I think you learn more about yourself and about other people.
I saw a meme that said 90% of your relationship is talking about the way your parents fucked you up.
Man, that is an interesting. I never, but at least that's my style. I look at my problems in a relationship. I'm very, what's the best word for it? I won't say, I mean, maybe traditional. I don't know, I guess in this regard. And one of the things that I take to heart, I do not share my problems with my girl. I don't do it. Because I look at my problems as problems that the masculine burden of performance. I don't know if you're familiar with this idea. I talk about whether I look at anything I go through that I'm built to endure the problems and the psychological stress that comes with the problems. And I don't want to transfer that to her to work on, because my goal, or rather my job in the relationship as the guy, I think is to solve problems and to be an emotionally stable kind of rock in the situation. And sometimes I probably take that too far. Like, when my mom died just a few months, well, I guess it was a few months ago at this point. I didn't even want to have, like, I was like, look, we're going to go to the hospital. We're going to pull the plug. We're going to spend time, me and my sister. She's like, all right, well, we're going to go. And I'm like, what do you mean? And at this point, she's been with me like 10 years. And my mom like looked at her as her daughter-in-law. And she was like, well, of course I'm coming with you. In my head, I'm like, okay. I wouldn't have asked though. Like I was actually taken aback that she wanted to go. And that sounds crazy to, I think, a lot of people. Certainly, I think half the population.
Question.
That sounds crazy.
Have you ever, how do you feel about therapy?
I've never had therapy. I think therapy is probably pretty useful. I don't feel compelled to. All right, so here's my problem with therapy. As a theory, I think it's pretty dang useful and good. In reality and application, here's my beef with it. I think the moment you introduce a monetary incentive to help someone solve a problem, that you change the dynamic, because the longer the problem remains unsolved, the more they continue to gain money from you. So that creates a conflict of interest naturally. And I don't think people think a lot about this, but it's real. The therapist.
That's like a boxing coach not wanting you to get too good.
No, because the boxing coach has...
Because a lot of people look at therapy as, and I say this as someone who doesn't go to therapy, but I plan to because I want to get around to it. But I see therapy as something you do to, not that you have an issue, but if you have stuff in your life that you're working on, you can bounce these ideas off of that person. They can give you a perspective that they're not emotionally involved in. And I think you keep it going. You don't have to go every week, but maybe you go maybe once every 3 months or something like that. So it's basically a human journal is the way I look at it.
And see, here's the thing about that to me. First, the boxer analogy, the boxing coach has an incentive for you to get better because he takes a percentage of your purse and he gets some recognition and glory. So the incentives are very much aligned with the boxing coach and the boxer, right? But the idea of me going to this person and them giving me a perspective, I also have a big problem with the idea of being educated to do that. Like, I think there is a sense of you need to know things and understand humans, but a lot of the perspective that's going to be gained to help someone work through a problem, that's going to come through life experience. That's going to come through doing difficult things, coming through hard issues. And if I don't know anything about what my therapist has gone through, like, let's talk about dealing with grief.
I guess a therapist can be, for if you can't find a mentor, that's what I'm thinking of, like who you bounce things off of.
Yeah, and I don't know how I have nothing is the way I understand the way a therapist advertises and talks about itself and the way the referral works. I don't have anything to know if they're going to actually be a net gain. There'll be a different perspective, which in and of itself is valuable. Is it valuable enough to match the economic investment based on what they know and what they've done and gone through? Like imagine getting a therapist, and I'm gonna go rap about the death of my mom, and they've never dealt with anybody close to them dying, which is entirely possible if my therapist is like in their 30s or 40s. Then I'm in this weird spot because they're going to know what to say to me book wise. But if it's one thing you learn, booking reality or theory and action, they don't always line up. And I think that's my general issue with the idea of therapy. It's not that it can't work and doesn't work. It's that there's so many unknowns and variables that, and I still believe that the incentive structure is misaligned because if you come and so it's like the medicines, and where's the medicine and the cure or the treatment, right? Or where's the money and the cure or the treatment? All right. If I keep you treated, you keep coming back. Now do I think that in actuality, do I think therapists are going to be, going to drag out these? I think many of them have a good heart.
Not boxing coach, personal trainer.
Okay, personal trainer. There we go. Yes, now I see what you're saying. Yeah. So in theory, yeah, the personal trainer wants you to get it in as good a shape, and then you keep coming back to state maintenance and all that. So okay, that's a different perspective, and I'll give you that perspective. I'll consider that. That's real. All right.
And just to kind of wrap this up and put it into a relationship bow, that person that I have in my life she's got a master's and everything. She was a counselor, school counselor. And I feel like I got the cheat code to life because like I have a partner with such amazing communication skills. And as someone with terrible communication skills, sometimes I feel bad for her. She got to deal with me.
Man, that's why this is a cool conversation, because in this regard, I am very different. I think that, and I bet your communication skills aren't as bad as you think they are, especially if you have, because from what I take from all of my interactions with you, you have a more strategic mind than the average person, which means if you can see how things are going to turn out and what's going to happen, you at the very least know what not to say, or you can think through what not to say or what's best to say. Now, whether you have the call it the emotional discipline to not say it and not do it, or the emotional kind of alacrity to do it in a certain way to get the message through. That's a different story. But at the very least, you understand that there are some things you should do and not do, and say and not saying. I think that probably gives you a leg up with communication.
It does, but then I struggle with like I know most of the times I know what I should say, and that's where like, oh Cam, I know what to say most of the time. I know what people want to hear, but then I'm struggle with authenticity, and then also in the back of my head, you keeping it real.
Ah man, now and that is another conversation for another time. But on that note, if you enjoyed this episode of the Life After Fight podcast, we would appreciate it if you like, share, and comment, all those things to drive the algorithm up and let people know and get the word out. And on top of that, more specifically, share this with people who are in relationships. See what they think. We would love to hear what you think.
Actually, listen to this with someone in a relationship.
Even better. Or listen to it with the person you're in a relationship with.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
And get some feedback, and you'll have some great talks, I hope.
Yeah. All right.